California. This is probably the most well-known state in the US, with its famous film industry, great weather, and also the birthplace of skateboarding. Originally created by the surfers who wanted to take the art of maneuvering waves on the ocean with a board to the rough asphalt tracks of the streets. Skateboarding has since become an established sport, but during its early days when the craze was just taking wind, one company emerged to coincidentally take the spot as the go-to brand for skateboarding shoes. That company was Vans, and today we're going to talk about one of their most popular shoes, the Vans Old Skools. Before we talk about the shoe itself, we first need to talk about the man behind the shoe, and that was Paul Van Doren. While gaining experience with shoe manufacturing during the 60s, Paul Van Doren saw the results of the revenue split between retailers and manufacturers, with retailers pocketing the majority of the money. So Paul got an idea. He wanted to combine manufacturing and retail into one single entity, so in 1966 Paul took his family and moved to California, and on March 16, 1966 at Street 704E Broadway in Anaheim, California, Paul Van Doren and 3 partners opened up their first ever shoe store, and the Vans dream was born. During its initial years, Vans faced some uphill battles. One of these were during their opening day. Paul Van Doren would have display models showing in his store and also have shoe boxes scattered around. However, the boxes were empty, and the only shoes that Vans had available at that time was their display models. Vans had 12 customers that day, but since they didn't have any inventory, Paul told them to come back later so they had time to actually make the shoes. And while Paul did manage to make the shoes in time, there was another problem. He forgot to have cash in his register, so he couldn't actually give out change when people wanted to pay for the shoes. Due to this, he told the customers that they had to come back tomorrow to actually pay for the shoes. And thankfully, Paul sold his shoes to some very nice people, because the very next day they came back and paid for their shoes. While it was common for shoes to have names back in the day, Vans shoes didn't. Instead, they had a style number. This was mainly due to the fact that Paul operated his business in a very technical way, both the retail and manufacturing process being present at the same time. The first shoes that Vans would release would be the style number 44, who would later be named the Authentic. Due to Paul's know-how of how to manufacture shoes, he was able to make these shoes very durable and with very good traction, which resulted in Vans being very popular with the rising skateboarding crowd at that time. During the 70s, they became so popular that Paul eventually saw the potential to market his shoes exclusively to this kind of crowd, and so he did. In 1975, with the help of skateboarders Stacy Peralta and Tony Alva, who are members of the popular skateboarding group the Z-Boys, Paul created what at the time was known as the style number 95, or as we know it today, the Era. He would also go on to pay and sponsor both Peralta and Alva with free Vans if they in turn wore the shoes during contests, and this just helped solidify Vans as the go-to brand for skateboarding shoes. And while this helped Vans increase their overall sales, they were about to release their next big shoe, a shoe that would be known as the Rebel Skater Shoe of America. In 1977, Vans would release what at the time was known as the style number 36 and what would later be dubbed the Old Skool. Unlike its predecessors, the Old Skool was donning a new smaller detail that caught the eye of anyone who looked at it, and that was the jazz stripe. This iconic stripe was originally just intended as a doodle by Paul, but would then go on to be incorporated in leather material on the side of the shoe, instead of canvas, which was what the rest of the shoe consisted of. And while this small detail seemed insignificant, it did a lot for the shoe, because no longer did Vans shoes have a great school feel, which was the sentiment at that time. They instead became something for people who wanted to be different, and the jazz stripe has since become a staple of Vans' identity. The Old Skools would go on to become one of Vans' go-to shoes and also one of the most popular classic, and even to this day it is still one of their flagship shoes and is beloved by many people the world over. Now let's move away from the history and talk about the shoe itself. The Vans Old Skools comes in a full-on canvas upper alongside the leather jazz stripe, accompanied by a durable gum sole bearing the iconic waffle pattern. Even though the shoe itself is nice to look at in simple colorways, Vans allows you to go wild with the design. Since the 80s, Vans has had a big focus on customizing. This is mainly due to the fact that skateboarders heavily customized their shoes back in the day, whether it be with a pen or spray paint. The Vans Old Skool comes with some rather impressive colorways, and due to the design it almost doesn't matter which color you decide to go with, as the silhouette itself looks good in almost anything. Not even to mention the amazing collabs that the Old Skools have been a part of, like the Van Gogh collab, the Peanuts, Golf Wang, North Face, Supreme, and many more. And as a fun fact, the Old Skools was used in the very first collab project that Supreme did with Vans back in 1996. This was when Supreme had just existed for 2 years, and for a first try, I think they did great. And now we're at my favorite part in the video, where I get to give out my own opinion on these shoes. And well, I think that the Old Skools are a very cool shoe. I mean, they're definitely one of the better choices of sneakers if you're looking for a low top model, and the variety of options you get with it is literally limitless, with the offering of being able to customize this shoe yourself. And when it comes to collabs, I think that Vans has hit it out of the park with the Old Skools, and that also goes for some of their other models as well. Although I'm not too crazy about them, I still think they are a very cool sneaker, and I do get why they are a staple of the skateboarding community and why people are still wearing them to this day. The impact of the Old Skools is simply amazing. I mean, being able to have a model that is directly associated with a sport is an amazing achievement. And while I think this is what initially got the ball rolling on the Old Skools' popularity, I think the model has succeeded this. The model itself, with its small jazz stripe, has become a shoe that people are still buying and wearing to this day. And just like the Old Skools deserves the crown as the go-to skater shoe, I also believe that it deserves to be acknowledged as one of the classic skateboarding shoes in sneaker history. That's all I have for you guys. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you want to see more. I'm SneakerKlev, and I'll see you in the next video.